let me welcome you most sincerely. Before I do that, let me commit this. The Senate is empowered to screen certain categories of presidential nominee and approve before. Please, let us have one meeting. To screen them before they assume office. It is in respect of those constitutional powers that were here today to screen the presidential nominees for the position of commissionership at the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Earlier on, that is sometime late last year, we had cause to screen about 2 of them, or 3 rather, for the same positions. The tenure subsequently of 4 others expired, and the president has nominated 4 great Nigerians to fill those vacant positions. But before we go into the proper screening, let me quickly introduce my colleagues who are here for this purpose. On my far right is a young lady, the single senator, a professor, who represents Plateau South.
It's a pleasure.
Next to him is a great Nigerian. I will come to that. Next to Global is Senator Frank, who represents the entire PDP in the Senate. Senator Abaribe, Senator Sabi, who represents. Next to him is the newest minority leader of the Senate, Senator Deputy. You know our procedure here. After you would have introduced your one after the other. So you will take some of them, it's not far, and then we'll start with one, we'll take them one after the other. That we decided, due to the importance of what NERC represents in the power sector, to screen the nominees, in spite of the fact that some of the documents, which you know, were supposed to be forwarded to us, have not been completely forwarded to us, especially the report from the DSS. It's not before us. We've just received a report from the Inspector General of Police. We are doing so, but just to inform you that we will not present this report on the floor of the Senate until we receive a report from the DSS. If we report the report from the DSS, any of your nominee has issues, of course, you know what we follow. And so we'll screen them, we'll wait until we have a complete report from the DSS before the report will be presented to the Senate. And so, without wasting much time, introduce the people you have brought, the nominees, and then we will tell you who we will start with. You are welcome.
Thanks. Honored to appear before you this afternoon, and I just wish to confirm that what Mr. Chairman said, we will ensure that it is done. We are actually awaiting it. As soon as we got the one for the police, we forwarded it, and as soon as we get this one, I can assure you, sir, that same will be forwarded. I'm aware of the convention that not until you have it, the report will not be presented. I'm acknowledging what you've said, and I thank you for the indulgence that you are taking us pending when we get the report. I'm also aware that after the general introduction, every man will hear his name. Everybody has to be out of sight and out of hearing, as you normally say in the law court. And I'm sure that the nominees will take it from there, subject to the confirmation of the Senate. May I start from my extreme right to introduce, has been a commissioner before, he's been represented by Mr. President. Subject to the confirmation of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, sir. Mr. Chairman, is to my immediate left, representing South-South. Mr. Dafe Akpene is to my immediate left. The two others, to my immediate right, Dr. Yusuf Ali represents North Central, and Engineer Chidi Ike represents Southeast, is to my far left. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Mr. Chairman, distinguished senators.
For us, and so we will follow with Engineer Chidi Ike, Yusuf Ali, and then Nathan Shati. So take them to my office, or they'll come one by one. Distinguished gentlemen, Barrister Dafe, from your CV, the CV tells us that you are a lawyer with a lot of experience in corporate practice. We're also aware of the fact that you've done your first term at NERC, and the President, in his wisdom, has graciously nominated you for a second tenure at NERC. With that background, it will be assumed that you are very knowledgeable with the issues relating to that agency. I'm correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And so we can take you up on all the issues as they affect the power sector, not limiting us to your mandate in NERC. And so I will start with the first salvo. And it has to deal with the performance agreement. We are told that the performance agreement hitherto in BPE has been moved to NERC. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Excellency.
Because you know what BP was doing and how you were relating to them as far as these issues are concerned. Now that it has been moved to NERC, what will be the implication?
Can I answer now, Your Excellency?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Your Excellency, distinguished members of the committee, with the privatization exercise that we concluded in the power sector in 2013, we handed over the assets, generation and distribution assets, to private hands, but in a regulated space. But we created, with the benefit of hindsight, a unique scenario whereby it made it difficult to regulate, in the essence that you created a scenario whereby there's a shareholder relationship with government and another government agency on one side, and there's the licensee relationship with the regulator. And ordinarily, performance obligations are not what you would put on a shareholder. They're obligations you put on the licensee itself. So it created a difficult scenario for us in the sense that you had to deal with two different agencies on two issues that were not related to the commission. with the expiration of the performance agreement, we've now corrected that by moving the performance obligations of the utilities itself in the agreement to the regulator. So performance now becomes a regulatory issue and not an issue that we would have to discuss with shareholders. And if there's any shortcomings, it will be dealt by the regulator directly with the licensee.
Well, I'm sure Nigerians would like to know what you mean. Say performance is not a regulatory issue. If DISCO, for example, does not perform its duty, if it's owing, if it's not delivering to people, what would you do? What is in that agreement?
No, together. Please, most people sitting here don't even understand what we're talking about. Can you tell us the main features in the performance agreement so that Nigerians listening to us will also understand what we mean by performance agreement? The main features, there are key features there so that you can combine it and answer at the same time.
Let me add another one. The deputy, his own is 1B. I want mine to come as 1C. What I want to ask is coming from your explanation. If I get you correctly, you said with the expiration of the performance agreement, the performance agreement has now been moved to the regulator and is now a regulatory issue. Did I get you correctly? Yes. So, my question then, from which year did we, enter into this agreement with the DISCOs? 2013. So, and GENCOs. So the question I want to ask is, from 2013 until this period when the performance agreement expired, can I take it to mean that there has been the regulatory issue was not really an issue with the performance of the GENCOs and DISCOs? If it is, depending on whatever your answer, perhaps you may want to tell us the level of involvement. Because from your explanation, I'm taking it to mean from that period until now, it has not been a regulatory issue. So what kind of issue has it been? And what is your involvement with it? That's my...
Okay, thank you, Chairman, distinguished senators. The key features of the performance agreement are basically to address the failings that lead into the privatization. And for the sector, one of the key issues is loss reduction. And all the utilities studies were done, and for each utility, on the basis of the investments carried out, the investors were meant to reduce the losses over a certain period of time. And there were also, to support them in doing that as well, there were also other key elements that they were meant to bring in technical partners that would support them in running this business to ensure that, yes, you've committed to bringing down the losses over this period, but we know that this is a business that no one has done to the satisfaction of Nigerians. So they came in with they would bring on board foreign technical partners who would support them to bring the losses down. And as the losses come down, efficiencies are meant to improve. And what that means to the average Nigerian is improved supply and reliability of supply. The distinguished Vice Chairman asked that what then was the difference? The difference, distinguished senator, is that we created a scenario where the investors of the business were involved in obligations that were that of the utility itself. So if we wanted to go after the DISCO, as we did in 2018, whereby we threatened to cancel licenses for non-performance, we had the difficult issue of dealing with the shareholder side, whereby there were arguments that, oh, we haven't done this because government didn't do certain things, or these are contractual issues that government has also not met its obligations under the contract. So it created a difficult scenario for us it created a difficult scenario in regulating that space. The distinguished Senator Sabi asked that, were these issues not regulatory issues? Yes, they've always been regulatory issues, but they've been anchored by BPE, creating a legitimate expectation that, oh, if I have not performed, the licensee can tell you that, yes, I've not performed because I'm in this with government, and government hasn't done this, or I have not performed because government has not done X, Y, and Z. With moving these obligations purely to the licensee, the Commission has no relationships with the shareholders. So the relationships that the shareholders have with the utilities will be as shareholders, whereby the board will present performance reports to them, and they have rights to attend and receive notices of meeting. But with regards to the operation of the business itself, the utility is 100% responsible. You can no longer say, oh, I'm running to BPE, or government was supposed to do this for me. It is now the responsibility of the CEOs of those businesses to run those businesses like regulated utilities. And they will now be dealt with the way other utilities, other regulated entities are dealt with. So when we see the governor of the CBN relating with the banks, he has no relationship with who the shareholders of the various banks may be. Likewise with NCC. So we are moving to a scenario whereby the utilities are now directly responsible for their regulatory issues 100% to the regulator.
I'm hearing from you, and I think I would like you to address a further issue. Given the present scenario you are telling us, do we take it, or let me say, do Nigerians now take it to mean that the losses which these licensees promised to reduce, because I know since I entered this parliament, the story has always been that of ATC and C, or what do you call it? Is it aggregate technical? Yes, commercial, technical, and collection losses. You call it ATC and C. Now, me, I see that as an abracadabra. And I've said it every time I'm opportune to, speak. Because what Nigerians are interested in is power. And the little understanding I have with the reduction of these losses, as expected by the licensees in their operation, is that the transformers that are servicing various locations in town, for example, usually that is where consumers see problem. They will tell you our transformer has blown, transformer has this, or maybe if there is any small spark, the thing trips off. And I understand at a layman's level that because you are expecting people to be using this pay as you go, during the period this transformer trips off light around that area, if it's for 3 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours, it means the light is not being consumed. And that is more or less like revenue loss. So just taking at that layman's level, that is why many Nigerians are used to the, yay, NEPA, because NEPA has just brought light. Is that not? Nigerians want that thing to cease. And I remember the late comedian. Yes, sir. This is, in fact, to me, of everything we are doing in power, this is the most important. Because if Nigerians don't get light, any other thing we are speaking, my chairman, is grammar. And I think that is where the real issue is. And I make it bold to say that if you go to many of our neighborhoods, honestly, the transformers that were there before these things were sold out are still the same transformers. No value added, nothing has happened in those places. So how do you reduce losses? Because I understand the reduction of the losses there is if there is stable power supply at those areas, the meters are running depending on the consumption by the consumers. But in the event that the light is not there, you can't bill. And of course, that is why they found it very easy to go to the crazy bill that Nigerians are running away from. So, Mr. Chairman, honestly, this is the critical issue as far as consumers and Nigerians are concerned. So I don't know, with the new expectation, what do Nigerians expect? What should they expect?
Just note down.
Your opinion on that? Don't refer to the president, because the president will make the appointment. In your opinion, has made the appointment for the second term of the secondly, with the experience and the agency, have you found that problems that are bedeving that agency and the ways to sort it out?
Thank you, distinguished chairman. I will start with the last question. I really can't say why me out of the 210 million Nigerians. And as a Christian, I can only attribute it to the grace of God. But what I can say is, for the past 5 years, which I did this job from January 2017 to 10th of January 2022, was I put in my best. And I tried my very best to contribute. With the issues bedeviling the agency, and that's something I'm quite passionate about, and something that when we met with the Senate Committee on Power, I think only Senator Sabi and the Vice Chairman were there. I highlighted clearly that, yes, our enabling law, what it did excellently was it enabled us conclude a privatization. But the enabling law hasn't adequately empowered us as a regulator to superintend over this sector. And we've gone on to work as a commission. We've identified the areas, and we've worked with the team put together by the Senate Committee on Power towards reviewing the Electric Power Sector Reform Act from being a reform act to being a purely electricity act that deals end-to-end with all the issues in the sector. So it should put NERC in a similar position to the way the central bank or the NCC is with regards to their licensees. Since the press is here and they may not be aware, if you look at the finding powers of NERC, we operate in a billion-dollar industry whereby all the investments are in dollars and it takes millions of dollars to put in any investment in place. The finding powers of the Commission are limited to 10,000 naira for offenses that stem out of regulations, and 10,000 naira per day for offenses, breaches that stem out of license terms and conditions. This is not sufficiently deterrent to attract the right behavior. And we've pushed, and we're working closely with the distinguished committee to ensure that we have in place an Electricity Act that addresses the issues we have in the sector today. Coming back to Senator Savi's question is the issue of the performance agreement. Investments will only follow certainty. If an investor doesn't appreciate the fact that doesn't have that comfort that if I put in 10,000 naira into this business, this is the return I'm going to get from the business, there will be his bankers, it will be difficult for him to get financing to invest in that business, and there will be no incentive to invest in the business. So what we are doing now with the change in the performance agreement, it gives the Commission the mandate to hold the licensee fully responsible, and the licensees will now go back to their shareholders who now have a responsibility to say, we need to put money into this business. And because the performance issues are now guaranteed by the regulator, there is a line of sight on returns that can be made in the business itself.
Before we leave, will you say that those performance agreements, are you satisfied with the contents and the letters of those performance agreements?
Distinguished Chairman, hindsight is 2020, and I would say no. There's been no satisfaction.
Good.
Yes.
If we are not satisfied with performance agreement, because I've gone through a few of them, you know that there are obligations on both sides. As a regulator, now that you've taken charge and you're going to take action, which, of course, we support, you know that performance of the licensee is contingent on performance of government. You agree with me? Good. So if we are going to take actions on the non-performance of those that were licensed to take over these entities, what will you be doing with the government? Because especially for this course, where you have 40% of government and 60% of the people running this stuff. Even in the GENCOs, there is a provisions that those people were expected to ramp up generation. And of course, none of them, from what we know from this side, have been able to do that. So now you've taken over, you're going to take action. What will be the implication on government?
Is from a regulatory and policy side, there has to be a closer working relationship, which has already started. Fine, we say yes, we agree that government has obligations, but I would also say that government has not failed in its concern for this sector. And if we look at the subsequent steps that have been taken, the approach that, okay, you are fully privatized now, go and stand on your own. At every time where there have been issues in the sector, government has come in to intervene. Shortly after privatization with the NEMS fund to address the losses, we've also had the GENCO assurance to also address the inadequacies of returns from DISCOs to meet the obligations of the generation of the GENCOs upstream. So government has shown its commitment towards meeting its obligations towards the sector, but now is to ensure that we have a closer working group on the government side to ensure that all the issues that have to do with government's own responsibilities. So when you would speak to a lot of the licensees, they will tell you that one of the critical issues they have that affect their losses are MDA debts. government not paying its own bills. And the level in dealing with these MDA debts, there are different spectrums. You have at one end, you have the military installations that tell you that, look, my friend, if you take out the power in cantonment, this
it has security implications.
It has security implications for the country. So it's been to ensure that on the government side, we work together as a team from both the legal and the policy side to ensure that we're able to address all the issues holistically.
So will you say that it will be, for instance, my Senate leader is a licensee. Will you say that it will be unfair for you to revoke his license, knowing fully well that government is owing him about 20 billion, and then he's not been able to meet up with the minimum remittance that you require him to do? Will you say that it will be unfair for you to do that?
The law imposes us to act in a judicial manner. And in acting in a judicial manner, we must take cognizance of all the circumstances. I don't think by any measure to be equitable where the Commission has notice of the fact that the impediments affecting someone's performance have been caused by government to still hold him responsible for that fact, or for that failure. What we can do...
Go ahead.
So what has to happen is we will now need to look at it, okay, taking out, discounting the government's contribution to your performance, how have you performed in other areas? If you look at some licensees, taking out just the issue of the government performance, you can see improved performance in other areas. But some people, without even the government performance, you don't see performance in other areas as well.
Government performance will create $1 billion. I need to ramp up infrastructural deficit that I have, and I have 20 billion tied down. Of course, it will affect the attempt or my efforts in ramping up the deficit I have in infrastructure. But we've gotten substantially what we want to know as far as this issue is concerned. We'll take you to other issues.
Just one point you have mentioned earlier. I believe, I'm happy you said you are to act judicially. And as far as I know, these people came with the impression that they can do this job and to improve the system away from the failure that it was. Because earlier you said, when he asked you to give us the features of the performance agreement, you said it was based on what those licensees promised to cure from the failure that led to the privatization in the first instance. So if this is true, are we not saying that these people do not have the technical competency and they also did not have the financial muscle when they came on board? And so they were depending on, because government already has substantial, assets. Now remember you said study was conducted to evaluate those assets. Otherwise, how does government have that 40%? Was it arbitrary? I believe there must be something that led to that 40%. And if that is their own equity participation, I expected those coming in as investors, to come with the technical expertise like you said. And some of them, from reports we have gotten, they didn't come with any technical experts. It's husband and wife and children and the like.
And girlfriends.
And girlfriends. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, honestly, let's be very fair to government. Government has given enough latitude. Government was magnanimous in asking people to come and do what they have promised to do. But now they are turning around to say government's own obligation when they have not even met their own one side of the obligations. So I think we need to really get these things clear.
You are defending government
No,
now.
yes, I have to defend government.
You are not asking questions.
Because the issue is simple. Yes, you are putting the issue as though it is from that angle. But I'm happy, like I told you earlier, that you came back around when you said when you discount government's expectation and just look at the order, some of them do not come clean. I'm happy you said so. But I thought I should also underpin this issue so that we can get it very clear.
It's okay. Commissioner, my question would be, I would like to know to what extent the Regulatory Commission can enforce what they had promised that TCN and distribution companies can deliver with a timeline. Because sometime in June, I got a letter from you after I wrote a letter talking about the power challenge in my senatorial district. And when I got that letter from you, I was very excited because you not only gave me a timeline, you told me that those fundings are CBN funding, and you told me that the EEDC would do a 36-kilometer, 33 kVA line, and that will be completed in October 2021. You also told me that they would do a 12.2-kilometer dedicated line that will be completed in the same 2021. And also told me that TCN would do the 40 MVA that will be completed in 2022 June. I have followed up by people who were so excited about it, and they actually told me that if that is achieved, that's the most I can do for them. Now, I followed up, and both TCN and EEDC seem to tell me that they don't think anything can be done. So I just want to find out if there's anything your regulatory commission can do when you have a timeline and it means nothing to those people. Thank you.
That I spoke in the opening that performance is now a regulatory issue for the discos that has no longer has a shareholder intervention, and I've expatiated on that over the course of this screening. The issue with TCN, we need to bear in mind that TCN is wholly owned by government at this point in time, and their ability to deliver on whatever representations they make is based on the budget approved by the National Assembly for them, and also affected by the overall economic prevailing circumstances that lead to the ability to meet up on these releases. There's a regulatory angle to it, which, like I've said, if you do not meet up on your performance obligations, there are consequences for not on the licensee. But as it affects TCN, I'm not holding brief for them or making any excuses for them. But if they do not have the funding to meet up on that obligation, it's for the Commission to investigate. And I now agree that, okay, was this a failure of management to meet up on its commitment, or you didn't have the funding from the budget to deliver on your obligations?
Okay. Well, the first one is on the service-based tariff, which your set of commissioner initiated. Will you say that you are satisfied with the performance so far as it relates to what you people introduced, service-based tariff? Is there any success rate? If there is any success rate, what would that be? The second question is on MAP. You know that MAP failed, and that was why the government introduced mass metering. Was it the design of regulation or implementation that MAP failed? And is it possible that you people would have done something differently? The last one is on embedded generation. So far, will you say that embedded generation will create the access to electricity that we yearn for? And if that is the case, do we have more of that in the pipeline? Those are the three questions that we would want you to answer, and probably will excuse you.
For Your Excellency. On the issue of the service-based tariff, you asked if whether I'm satisfied and what is the success rate. If we look at it in absolute terms, compared to where we are coming from, I would say yes, I'm satisfied, because in the past, in addressing the reviews, we were doing blanket reviews on the basis of promises that, okay, give us this tariff to everyone, and prices for consumers would go up without improvement in supply. And this went on to the extent that at the beginning of the privatization, tariff reviews were not contentious. And I dare say that we had a tariff increase in an election year, and Nigerians didn't object to it. Where we started having contentions were where these tariffs were going up and services were not commensurate improvement in supply was not being done. And we had to agree a win-win situations while still ensuring that the regulatory reviews were done in accordance with the MITO order at the specified intervals, but Nigerians no longer being taken for a ride. The introduction of the service-based tariff was done after we did the consultations on one of the minor reviews. And Nigerians told us emphatically that we will pay for power if it is there. So the only way to agree this mechanism was to put a mechanism in place whereby we would do location-based pricing on the basis of the current state of the network. So for customers who are currently enjoying better supply because investments have been done, let the appropriate pricing be charged. But for customers that are not enjoying commensurate supply, they should only be affected by reviews when investment has been done and you've been able to move them to higher supply levels. So from looking at it in absolute terms, from where we're coming from, yes, I'm satisfied, but it's work in progress.
Are you monitoring that? And won't you say that is discriminatory?
Yes, it's being monitored, Your Excellency, and
you're charging those who are getting more.
And it isn't discriminatory.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's not discriminatory.
It's okay.
Okay. The second question Your Excellency asked was on the issue of MAP, whereby government introduced the mass metering intervention because MAP failed. I respectfully beg to disagree that MAP failed because there are 11 discos and performance varies across the 11. For one of the discos, before they had their unique in-house shareholder problems, MAP was a success for them. And the Abuja disco. So the different discos performed differently. And the mass metering wasn't issued because MAP failed. And MAP didn't fail on its own. The challenges we faced with MAP had to do with different issues in our polity. So we had agreed this new program, and after it was done, just immediately after it was done, Customs increased the duty on meters. That affected the abilities to deliver. So the National Mass Metering Program was introduced to complement and government seeing that this metering is critical to the success of the entire industry. Let us complement what is on ground, because MAP still exists today and is being run side by side. The last question you asked, distinguished chairman, was on the issue of embedded generation. Embedded generation is also called distributed generation, and it is really encouraged by the Commission. But it has to be done in a... Okay, so embedded generation is whereby at below transmission level, the DISCO gets a supplier that provides supply generation directly into the DISCO's network. What it does is that it improves reliability and addresses local issues within the network, in that the DISCO is taking responsibility for its own performance and other sources, yes. And in doing that, there are key considerations. In putting in place your embedded generation, because you want to ensure reliability, it shouldn't come on the basis that distorts the pricing of the already on-grid supply. Because if someone comes to you in Maitama and says, oh, we're increasing your bill because we have put in place embedded generation, the customer will tell you that.
Yeah, but if I'm having like 24/7, and that is what you've done now, that is what service-based tariff is done. It's not different. If I have 24/7 light and there's a slight increase, I don't think you people should restrict that. It has to do with regulation too.
Yes, like I was saying, Your Excellency, if it amounts in a slight increase, that is fine. But when it now distorts the pricing to the extent that because you've put in embedded generation, it is now cheaper for the customer to run on his own self-generation, right? That isn't what we want for the sector.
It's okay.
Yes.
That is the disadvantage of having your name put first. You're the one who will take the heat. You are the one who will take the heat. I think that if we take you on for long, people will still not be very satisfied because of the importance of power in the country. And so you've at least addressed some of the very serious issues that Nigerians are bedeviled with. We believe that if and when we confirmed you, you will bring your experience to bear on how the power sector is regulated. As we stand now, there are a lot of gaps, a lot of issues, and the blame is put squarely on the shoulders of NERC. We believe that you have a lot to add when and if you are confirmed. I think on that note, we'll excuse you to bring in the next person. No, there are a lot of people who come, so you can ask those ones when they come, especially the guy from your state. Oh, sorry. Before you leave, two additional senators walked in. Senator Kanuri man from Borno. He's delayed because of the the bandit issues. You now take a bow. You are a bandit, though. No, he's the first person. When you come first, all the heat. No, the yeah. Made you shy now. We said this one not shy. See you.